everybody from representing Sandstone and the project, and also all the neighbors that have shown up for this meeting, and anybody in the future that is watching the video. We're glad that you were able to be a part of this. Um, Sandstone is represented here by Jeff Mailman, and then he will introduce everybody from his team. And what I've done is we've solicited a bunch of questions from the neighborhood. This project, which is proposed, the Jeff Hotel proposed to go in on the corner of Slauson and Jefferson in that strip area, um, has been talked about for I think almost 2 years now. And I first heard about it when it was initially being proposed. And the first thing that I did was sit down or introduce myself to the 5 houses that would be directly impacted on the alleyway to say, hey, this is something that's being proposed. I'm agnostic on it. I just need you to know so we can have your input, because if they're directly impacted, they should at least have be a part of the conversation. At that time, since then they've been great. They have had conversations and meetings. If there's nobody here from those 5 houses, I've had conversations with one of the leaders of the 5, and I can express what that person told me as far as how they feel about the project. So with that said, the way we're going to do this is we had a bunch of questions that were submitted, and there's not a cutoff. We can definitely have more questions. What we're going to ask is that everybody, to make it simple, ask you if you have a question, a follow-up question or a new question, ask it in the chat. And Seth will be monitoring the chat throughout the meeting. And if there's a question that he wants me to make sure that I get to, he'll let me know. And so that way everybody's questions can be heard, but we're not going to, have people chiming in left and right with videos popping up. It's going to be just me moderating, asking the questions for everybody, and then we'll get the information, and hopefully the neighborhood can get the info they need. I do want to say this. I believe that this project has completed its requisite number of community meetings, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's
Right.
correct. The city requires 3 community meetings, and we've done that in addition to a slew of smaller individual meetings with particularly the neighbors directly adjacent to the project.
Right. And so what I want to say to that is the board, Seth and myself and others, we've been hearing a lot from the neighbors, concerns, issues, questions that we thought were already addressed maybe, and yet we're still popping up. And even though that you guys have already done your required 3 meetings, we asked, would you mind doing one more for the entire neighborhood, so that we can get these questions answered for everybody. And I personally am grateful that Jeff and the rest of the team was open to doing this. I know you don't have to, so I really appreciate it.
No, we're happy to do it.
Thanks.
Yeah,
So with
anytime.
that, I'm going to let you, Jeff, go ahead and introduce anybody from the team that you want to, and then we'll get into the questions.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. And look, I really appreciate the opportunity. As you know, this has been kind of a lengthy process, and throughout it, we've done our best to try to meet with anybody that had questions and answer any questions that came up. And so this is a terrific forum to do that. So we tried to bring together all of our sort of experts in the various subjects. So we've got Dave Garcia, Lynn Beckmeyer, and Michael Moore here representing Sandstone Properties. Sandstone is the developer of the site. Steve Nakata, Rodrigo Zayas, and Thomas Acosta, who are with Nakata and Associates. They are the architectural team who designed the building. Ryan Kelly is with Crane and Associates. He's the traffic engineer. Ira Kleinrock is here. He is with OLS Hotels and Resorts. He's the hotel operator. So Sandstone will own the building, build it, but then Ira and his team at OLS will actually operate it. So if there are any operations questions, we want to make sure that Ira was here to answer those. And then of course we've got Alan Seiko, who's with ESA. Alan is the environmental consultant who handled all the environmental documents and analysis for the city. So we're here at your beck and call. Whatever you want to know, we'll do our best to answer.
Awesome. And so that's great. Thank you. And what I'd like to do is what I'll do is I'll ask a question, Jeff, and my assumption is you'll know who on your team should be the right person to ask that. I'll leave that up to
I
you.
hope so. I hope I do.
So do I. All right, we're just going to jump right in because everybody I talked to had this same question, and I have the same question. Should this project go forward, what is your projected start date if all goes to plan?
So we're still in the entitlement process. Nothing, of course, is finalized until the city approves it. So we're still a little ways away from that being completed. Once the city votes to approve the project, it'll probably take about a year to do the construction drawings and another 3 months maybe for the city to do plan check. And then at that point, we put a shovel into the dirt, and it's about a 24-month build process. So we're probably not opening the doors for another maybe 3.5 years.
So to that question, okay, regarding the construction, when you start construction, I imagine the first thing you're going to do is dig for this subterranean parking. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
How long does that take?
Well, there'll be some demolition first, obviously, to remove the existing structures. But yes,
right.
Then we go down first.
But the question I have is, how long from this 15-month till start time? At what point do we start to see surface level construction?
I don't know, Steve or Lynn, do you want to take a shot at that?
We have to make them. There you go.
So, as Jeff was saying, it would probably be about a period of time for us to get to entitlements. Okay, but once we're ready to start construction, there's probably, I would say, about a month and a half, 6 weeks to do demolition of the existing buildings. And then there is what they call shoring and excavation. So there'll be shoring piles as they dig down to remove the dirt. So there's probably, I want to say, probably about 3 months, 4 months to excavate the dirt out of the required parking area.
And then, and you guys complete the parking area before you start working on the surface?
Yeah, so there would be some perimeter, what they call shotcrete, perimeter concrete walls, and then they would build up the foundations and then the intermediate levels of parking that come up to the podium level, okay?
So on a 24-month build, are we talking about a year before you start to build the actual hotel? Is that about the timeline?
Now that a lot of that is subject to the owner developer actually getting a contractor on board. There is no contractor on board right now. And I'm sure a lot of those questions can be more specifically answered. Right now, it's just estimates. Probably, 4 or 5 months to get out of the ground to the podium, and then, how quickly a concrete stub can actually do each of the lifts. It's just subject to their construction schedule.
Thanks. That's helpful. I appreciate that. So now, just depending on the start time and with more people working from home, so we don't know what it's going to be like, what sound mitigations do you have in place to minimize interruptions on those on now and those who will continue to work remotely? I can imagine post-COVID, even a lot of people will be working from home as the new normal. So what sound mitigations do you have in place?
Sure. So the sound mitigation is largely something that happens during construction, not once it's built. Although once it's built, the design has created some elements to protect the neighborhood from additional noise. So let me talk about sort of those two things, and then I'm going to toss it over to Alan really to talk about the the environmental impacts and as related to noise during construction. One of the things that Steve did in his design and his team was to place the pool deck. There's a rooftop pool deck at the hotel, and that was pushed all the way to the Jefferson edge. It's got a solid wall that buffers it from the neighborhood. And so any noise that's happening on the pool deck should not be heard by any of the neighbors above the ambient noise in the community for sure. Also, the city has a noise ordinance and a noise policy that we obviously would adhere to both during construction and as built. And then Alan, I don't know, do you want to talk specifically about the noise features and the sound barrier?
Sure. So exactly what Jeff was stating, the city has a policy in its general plan that, you know, if there's construction noise impacting residences, that a noise barrier, a temporary noise barrier should be placed to protect those uses from construction noise. So that's what would happen in this case. There'd be a construction barrier along that edge of the project site. It would be likely be enforced as a condition by the city, it's a condition of approval. So if there's, does that answer your question?
It does. And in fact, there was someone who specifically wanted to know about soundproofing and curfew on sound regarding parties. I think there's a fear that considering it's a boutique hotel and who the clientele might be, that they might be coming home from working at YouTube and wanting to unwind on the roof and having noise, and then neighbors. It's a very quiet community. They were concerned about that.
So I'll also add that the city has ordinances for controlling sound amplifying equipment. You know, so if we're concerned about, you know, as you mentioned, parties or something like that, making noise with like a speaker or radio or something like that, there's an ordinance that controls the time of the allowable time. So for example, I'm just looking here at the ordinance here, and it's 8 p.m. Monday through Thursdays is the cutoff point. 10 p.m. is the cutoff point for Fridays and Saturdays. So the project would need to adhere to those time periods.
Excellent. Just staying on this idea of the barrier on the roof for a second. I think, Alan, you said that it extends all the way to Jefferson. Is this a U-shaped wall that would leave Jefferson exposed, or is it a square?
Yeah, so probably the best thing to do on this one perhaps is to have Thomas or Rodrigo maybe share their screen, and if you can show the illustration of that level, makes it a little bit more clear. I don't know if it's a rendering or perhaps the illustration of that floor.
I think it might be good to start out with the pool deck level, the floor plan to show the location of the pool up against Jefferson, and then maybe a cross section through the building showing that there's essentially building mass between the pool and the alley and the neighborhood.
We have that. And you know, I can also ask a quick question while you're looking for that. To in the interest of time, someone wants to know when the retail outlets have to be out of the space.
Oh, that's a good question. I think that's one for Dave Garcia at Sandstone. My understanding is that they're you know, obviously you'd like them to stay as long as possible before construction. They're a paying tenant, but David, I don't know if you have a specific time that those folks have to be out.
Well, we have the screen. He can answer that when we get back to this, when we're done with this.
All right, perfect.
I like to keep it moving, Jeff.
Yeah,
like
it's good. No, this is good. It's great.
So this is the roof.
Yes, so this is the roof plan. Actually, it's the fifth level, so it actually shows the pool deck up against Jefferson. And you can see the courtyard that's encircled by guest rooms, and then there's the alley, And then you can see the start of the rear yard wall to the houses on the opposite side of the alley. Okay, so the next slide is a section through this that actually shows the mass of the building with respect to the pool deck. So on your upper right, you can see the pool deck. The blue area is the recessed pool. The vertical lines is actually the wall of the hotel guest rooms looking into the courtyard. The light purple is the stack of hotel rooms, and the dark dashed lines is the width of the alley that separates to the Sunkist neighborhood. So
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, what is the length of the hotel that we're looking at here? What is the full length? And then how much space, how far? I'm trying to get an idea of the edge of the pool, which is of concern to people. How far is that away from the nearest backyard?
Okay, I'm just, I don't have a measurement right now, but it's about 55 feet vertically from the street to the pool deck. And so if you just multiply that out 4 times that, so that's probably about over 220 feet.
Yeah,
So
it's
200
quite a ways. I don't
Right.
think you're gonna hear noise from that pool deck.
Yeah, particularly since you've got the mass of the building and, you know,
Right.
we're creating some elements to actually deflect the sound with the overhanging roof structure. Thomas, if you go to the roof plan, you can see that there's actually a canopy that not only provides shade for the patrons of the pool, but it actually creates this kind of sound barrier, if you will, to the north, to the neighborhood, actually.
Thank you. That's actually, I think, west. Oh no, north. The reason I asked the question is because I've had at least one person concerned about there being a roof pool entertainment area, and I think their idea was that the entire roof was an entertainment pool section, and I really wanted everybody to be clear of where this seating area is located, what it's buffered by. It looks to me like it impacts uh, uh, people on their way to Del Taco a lot more than it does Greg Lane and the people who live on Segrel.
Right, and that's credit to Steve and his team that they recognize that was a sensitive use and perhaps would be an issue, and so they did bring it all the way to the Jefferson side.
Okay, if that's clear to everybody, I don't see that we have any questions about that. And if someone does have a question about this particular part of the structure, they can add it to the chat and we'll double back to it. The next question we have is, it's top of mind. What safety precautions are you putting in place to minimize and eliminate any potential spread of COVID among your workers? This would be pre and post vaccination. COVID's with us. It's a thing.
Yeah, for sure, it's a thing. That's why we're doing it in this format, right? Otherwise, we'd all be in person doing this. Of course, we're going to adhere to whatever the current requirements are by the city, the county, the state in terms of COVID precautions. Remember too that the public will not be allowed on the site, obviously, during construction, and so before there is a construction worker there, we're still looking at a year and a quarter, a year and a half, which, as we know, a year and a half ago, things were quite different. So all I can say is that we will do exactly what we're required to do. And if I know Sandstone, they'll go above and beyond. But it's hard to say what the condition is going to be for construction workers a year and a half from now.
Well, I understand that. I think right now, Slauson is closed at Jefferson, and I got a couple of emails from people saying, "Is this the hotel? Is this the hotel?" And so I think maybe some of these questions come from concerned that it's happening right now, and yet we're in the middle of a pandemic. Did you
Sure.
guys get the retail evacuation question answered?
You know, I don't know. I'm not sure that Dave responded.
Well, I'm here. This is
Dave, oh, there he is.
Dave
Hi,
Garcia.
Dave.
Now, our intent would be to, perfect rule, to keep every single tenant in place until 11:59 p.m. the day before we start demo, right? So, so again, it's all subject to timing with the city in terms of the permits and drawings. So again, we would like to keep the tenants in place as long as possible.
So the tenants have something somewhere of a 15-month buffer, give or take, probably a little bit more than that, based on what you said. All right, that's great. That question was answered. Let's move on to, let's talk about the traffic and in the construction record. Right now, you can see I drive down Segrel to make a left to go on the freeway all the time because my car doesn't tell me it's blocked off, dummy, and I forget and I have to go all the way around. What will happen during construction? Will that egress to the, I hope I'm using that word correctly, to the freeway be closed off? Will Sunkist Park be barricaded? How will it look during construction?
Actually, it's going to improve a lot from the current condition. We will not have to close Slauson at all. What the city's doing there is putting infrastructure into the ground right in the middle of that street, and so that's why it's blocked off. Construction for this project will be largely on site. We have to submit a staging plan to the city that needs to be approved that identifies where we will do construction laydown, where we're going to have our construction workers park, things like that. Our intent is to impact the streets as little as possible. For days when there are heavy concrete pours or significant hauling situations, I imagine we may have to close a lane here and there for a period of time, but we will not be closing Slauson like you see today.
That's good to know. Please, everybody tell each other and your neighbors, because they're going to be concerned about that Slauson won't be closed from this project, because you know they're going to ask you. All right. Oh, here's a question that came in. Can you guys upgrade the security measures on your website so that those of us with blocks to non-secure sites can visit it?
Yeah, and Alan, thank you. Alan shared that one with me when it came in. So in the interim, we've had our website developer reissue the SSL certificate for that, so everyone should be able to access that website without a problem right now. It's got all the latest renderings and the notices related to our community meetings. When the city finally approves the M&D document, the environmental document, the traffic study, all that will be posted on the site. So you'll have a link to it. And the site, for those who aren't aware, is the jeffculver.com. It's the JEFF culver.com. So
Named after you.
I wish I think they spelled it wrong. It's the GEOFF, but
yeah. Awesome. By the way, thank you so much, because I really do appreciate you expediting that. I did send a few questions to Jeff in advance so that we would, in the interest of time and being as expeditious with everybody's time as possible, I wasn't expecting you to have that taken care of. So that's great. Thanks.
Jeff or someone, can you type that website in the chat, please?
absolutely. I'll put it in the chat right now.
Perfect. And a reminder to anybody that's on the call, type your question into the chat, which is at the bottom of your screen if you have them, and Seth and I will get them answered for you. Okay, so I'm moving on to the next question. All right, so just a little backstory for everybody in the neighborhood. This project I first heard about, I think, a little over 2 years ago. I think it was Councilman Small, who put me in touch with Mr. Nakata and his associates. And we sat down, I think they sat down with a bunch of people in the neighborhood. And I looked at the project and I was informed by it. And the first thing I thought was, okay, well, this is going to impact directly 5 houses on Segrel. And I'm agnostic on the project when it comes to them. I knocked on everybody's door and said, there's a project, it's coming. They want to talk about it. But you're going to be the most impacted. Can we set up a meeting? Just so they can at least be informed and be a part of the conversation. And also because I know what it's like to live in a neighborhood where you have questions. And I was sure that people on Selmaraine were going to be concerned about the people on Segrel. But if the people on Segrel said, yeah, I hate it, that'd be one thing. And if they said, no, we're on board, we already, we've talked to them, then it would mitigate that conversation. So in the last 2 years, there have been a series of conversations with the people who own the properties that are impacted on Segrel. I think 3 of the homes are not owned by the same people anymore. I think 2 of them are a rental. One's been sold, but the 2 on the end, I think I don't remember her name. She's on the corner.
Angeles Hernandez.
Angeles Hernandez, and then Greg Lane, who is at the other end of the 5, have been in contact with you guys, have had meetings. I've spoken with Greg. If anybody is in this Zoom call from those 5 houses and wants to articulate what was said, they should be allowed to do that right now and express their feelings from it. But I did have a conversation with Greg. I do know what their concerns were. And my understanding is their concerns have been met. Looking that there's nobody so far from that group, Jeff, can you express what has been discussed, where they are on the project?
Yeah, absolutely. So we knew going into this project that, like you said, your first look at the project, that those would be the 5 homes that were most significantly impacted by this. And we met with them, and we have continued to meet with them over the course of the 2 years that we've been working on this project. A number of their concerns were things that we had already thought about, and we had already addressed, things like stepping back the building so that it didn't loom over them. It sort of goes up at an angle. But we heard from them a number of other concerns that we then addressed in subsequent revisions of the project. And I'll point out a couple of them. It's a long list, but things like the automated parking. We initially envisioned this project as having an automated parking structure, which is kind of cool. I don't know if you've ever visited the one at Helms Bakery, but it's pretty neat. You drive the car in, and then the machine sort of moves it around and keeps it there. It saves you a lot of space. But what it did do was it required the valet to drive the car into the alley so that the car actually touched the alley 3 different times. So you would come in, drop your car off, the valet would take it into the alley, bring it through the garage door, put it into essentially the machine, the automated parking. Then when you came back out, the valet would get your car out of that machine, touch the alley again to bring it around to the porte-cochere where you'd pick up where the guest would pick up their car. Then the guest would drive into the alley again to touch it for the 3rd time and exit the property. And so that was a big concern for the neighbors. So we went back, redesigned it. It now requires only a single touch for each car coming in, because when you come in now, you go immediately into a driveway that takes you down to the 1st level of the parking structure, where you drop it off to the valet. When you leave, you pick it up from the valet in that same spot and then exit onto the alley. So each car touches the alley 1 time rather than 3 times. That was a huge change that we made. That was a direct result of feedback that we got from those neighbors. They were also concerned about the view that they would get overlooked by the guests staying in the hotel that would stand on their balcony and look into their backyards. So we conducted a view study. We have the illustration if you're really interested in seeing it. But basically, what it showed was that by creating balcony walls that were high enough with landscaping and stepped back the way that they were, there really is no way for anybody who's on that balcony to look down and see the backyards. Privacy was a big concern for us, and Steve and his team did a nice job of designing that. We actually brought in a second landscape architect to do a more robust landscaping of that edge as well to deal with them. The selection of the hotel operator was something that came directly out of community feedback. The neighbors were very concerned about the operator, and would that operator be available if there was a concern about noise or security or anything. And Sandstone, in selecting the OLS, Ira and his team, that was one of the big selling points for them, was that they deal with a number of hotels that they manage and operate that abut directly residential. And Ira, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the specific hotels. There's several in West Hollywood that you're probably familiar with.
Sure. So we have locally, we have 4 hotels in West Hollywood, all of which abut to residential areas. We have La Park Suite Hotel, which is on West Mall Drive. We have the Chamberlain, which is on Knoll Drive as well, but on the north side of Santa Monica Boulevard. The Chamberlain Hotel, and Montrose, which is on Cynthia Way, and then the Grafton, which is on Sunset. And that backs up to a residential area. So we're very well versed in working with the residences. We certainly respect their privacy, and you can check with the city of West Hollywood. We have no complaints against us.
That's very
Yeah,
helpful.
and I'll say too, Alan, just real quick, that the neighbors adjacent to the project were actually very happy with the having a hotel, having something redeveloped there. They were excited to be able to walk to a restaurant or
Right.
be able to go over, just in a couple steps and grab a cup of coffee in the morning. Their concerns were largely related to the construction process and the impacts during construction. So we're continuing to deal with them. We found them to be open and helpful, and I think we've made progress. I think they all support the project. We're trying to take on some individual things. Some folks have solar panels or a pool or things like that that are sort of specialized concerns that we're dealing with as well. But I think if you had any of them here today, they would say they're supportive of the project and they're happy with the process so far.
Well, I do want to report to the community that I have spoken with Greg. He's not, I don't believe he's in town. I think he's out of town taking care of family. But he gave me the impression that they are on board with the project, and that it was, he has some noise issues, window visibility issues that you guys have discussed. And Angeles has, like you just said, solar panels and a pool, and she's concerned about dust directly impacting those. But those are they're minor, small, little detail oriented things. But to my understanding, they've all said they're in favor. Can we see the screen, the shot of the new alley car parking protocols where it just touches once so everybody can get that in their head?
Yes, we have a ground floor plan that shows the porte cochere, or the auto arrival area. Okay, so you can see the red dash line. That's the entrance off of Slauson. And we've actually got 2 lanes, one for drop off and another for bypassing to get down into the garage ramp that parallels inside the property line within the building to the lower levels of the parking level. So it's
Right, and that's a solid wall there, right, Steve? So
yes,
nobody's seeing headlights flash into their backyard.
that's correct. That's correct. Okay. And then on the exiting side, Thomas, can you just go to the cursor? That's the exiting. That's the blue line coming out of there. Okay. So it's actually a much cleaner system using a valet parking operation as opposed to the automated parking that we had before.
So now just looking at this, and I don't want to belabor this, but I know I'm going to get this question from other neighbors. So you're coming out, there's a stop sign there. There's a stop sign at Sagrel, there's a stop sign at Culver Park Drive, and the visibility of traffic coming down Slauson is abysmal. And this will be adding to traffic, at least heading left on Slauson. Is it going to be a left turn only, or are we going to start seeing people cutting into Sunkist Park coming right out of that alley? And is there any thoughts to how to mitigate traffic via stop, like a blinking stop, or anything that helps us out with that exit?
So that's actually a good question. I think for Ryan, our traffic engineer, I know that he's worked closely with Gabe Garcia and the folks at the city to look at all the potential options related to that. So Ryan, do you want to chime in on that turn?
Yeah, in terms of, for vehicles exiting the property and heading down the alley, I don't think you're going to have much concern about people turning up Slauson and then turning into the neighborhood, because if they want to head north while exiting the project, they have the option to turn right up the alley. So they can head up the alley to Berryman, which would make more sense in terms of, shortest path, as opposed to coming down, making a right, and then you're basically going southwest to end up going northeast. So I don't think you're going to have cut through from that movement up through Sagrel or Culver Park Drive.
Excellent, thank you. The other thing we talked about in this little section was the visibility from the back of the hotel, from the units. Do you have a slide that shows the eye line, how that's buffered, how that will not impact the homes on Sagrel?
Yeah, that's the view angle. We have
Yeah.
that one. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so you can see the sight lines in red, where there's planter boxes at each of the terrace levels from the rooms that actually create these sightline cutoffs. Okay, so you see above the residents' homes along Sagrel. Okay, and the green is looking up, what you would actually see from the rear yards at the hotel. And then we have a elevation or the the north side of the building that you'll be looking at.
Oh, it went away. I wanted to just I wanted to ask a question about that.
Okay, go ahead.
It looks to me like so it looks to me like the first level might have some kind of visibility to the houses on Sagrel, but I'm assuming this has already been shown to those residents and they're okay with what this visibility plan looks like. And then secondly,
so you
it's actually a little misleading, because one set of lines shows the view from the backyard looking up, and the other shows the view from the guests at the hotel. So Steve, maybe you want to
I
find
see.
those.
Green is looking up at the hotel.
Yeah, green is looking up at the hotel, and you see the man figure in the backyard of the residential lot. Okay, that's looking up. Okay, and the station point, or the viewpoints for each of the residents, is in red from the terraces, and that's, you can see the sight line, and you can see essentially it's a screen wall that cuts their view and forces people to look up.
I see. And so the top level has the red line, has the best visibility into the neighborhood, and what they will be able to see is the front porch of the house on the opposite side of Sagrel.
Essentially, yes.
Okay, that's extremely helpful, because this question, obviously you can imagine, has come up many times. I want to move on if we can. I've gotten a bunch of questions that have come in. So I'm going to go through the original questions and then we'll double back to those, because I haven't been able to Can we talk about, we already had that. The plan, oh, can we talk about the plans of Culver City, the Culver City traffic plans for Segrel Way, not the alley, but what are we doing about Segrel? If you have been on Segrel at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday, you hate everything. It's awful. So what are you guys doing to help deal with that traffic mitigation? Or do you know if the city has any plans?
Right. So there's, I guess, sort of two questions in that, Alan. And one is a question of what are the impacts of this particular project and what mitigations might be adopted as a result of that. And the second question is one of the existing condition and how does the city intend to deal with the existing condition of the cut through traffic? Because I'm very familiar with that. Spent a lot of time out there, particularly in the last 2 years, and understand that the existing condition is an issue, and we haven't built anything yet. So I'll throw it over to Ryan to talk a little bit about both the mitigations that the project has in terms of traffic, if any, and then what the city can do to address the current cut through traffic issue and the problems that you have today as an existing condition.
All right. So in terms of significant traffic impacts that resulted from our traffic impact analysis, there was one intersection, and it's the intersection of Jefferson Boulevard and the I-405 northbound ramps, which is actually controlled by the city of Los Angeles. And we work with LADOT to develop a signal system upgrade for that intersection to improve its volume to capacity ratio and mitigate that impact. Then in terms of the project, like right at the project site, the city was very concerned with the intersection of Jefferson and Slauson, and specifically at that intersection, the northeastbound left turn from Jefferson to westbound Slauson, because that's the main entry for the project, because the only way to enter the project driveway is right turn in from westbound Slauson. So they were concerned that that left turn pocket to Slauson, there could be queuing issues in the future where vehicles would spill back into the adjacent through lane and then maybe back up to the freeway, which they really wanted to avoid. So what we decided on and what the city requested was we add a dual left turn lane from Jefferson Boulevard to Slauson. So that's the plan. That's what's been approved by the city. And so it'll feed into 2 receiving lanes along Slauson in front of the site, and then it'll taper back shortly to a single lane, I think right around Culver Drive. But there will be 2 lanes of traffic and more red curb. So one of the things you mentioned was line of sight from the alley. Well, right now there's parking all along that north side of Slauson. There won't be once the project's completed. So when you're pulling out in that driveway, you're not just going to see a giant SUV on the street. You're gonna see the street itself. And if you roll forward, you'll see even more of it. There were no project site-specific impacts along Segrel. However, yeah, we did meet with Gabe Garcia, and he said, he's been hearing about Segrel and Culver Park Drive for a while now, and the city's actually gone out and gathered some data, and you can see, especially during the PM peak period, yeah, people come down Slauson, they make a right down Segrel, they make a right down Culver Park Drive, and then they make a left onto Slauson to get to the freeway without having to use Sepulveda. So the city required that the project fund a study to look at cut-through traffic in the neighborhood. So it'll follow the NTMP process that the city has for neighborhood cut-through traffic. And that's an involved process where, it's very involved, where, the city gathers certain data to make sure that there is a cut-through issue. And I think they basically already have that. Sometimes they try initial measures even before the NTMP process to see if those will work. And if they don't, then you jump into the NTMP process. And that starts with defining the study area. So if it was, say, Segrel Way, it could be, looking at Segrel from Slauson up up to Sawtell. And then all of the affected houses have to weigh in on it. And basically 50% plus one of the households have to agree on what the problem is. And then they work with the city to say, this is what we want to try for a solution. A residents committee is formed. The city works with that committee to figure out what the problem is, gather data, come up with possible traffic calming measures, present it before the city council, who can approve it. At that point, a trial installation is installed for whatever that measure might be, which usually lasts like 3 to 6 months. And then they do an after study to see, did it have an effect? And it goes through a few more things, but basically it's a back and forth process with city engineering, the community, and the end result is, hopefully something that works to reduce cut through traffic. So right now there is no direct plans to say, this is what we're going to do for Segrel. I know at community meetings, some people wanted to restrict left turns during the PM peak period. Some people propose, throwing a cul-de-sac on the end of the road and saying that no left turns from Segrel ever. But basically it's a process where you work with the city, and assuming you have consensus within the community, you can come up with something that can cut down on that cut through traffic.
Thank you.
And I want to, oh, good.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just in one of the early meetings that we had that you referenced earlier with Councilman Fish and Councilman Small at the time, we discussed this NTMP process, and the reason that the city had not done it was because they didn't have the funds to pay for this long involved process that Ryan just outlined. This project, Sandstone is going to pay for that NTMP process.
Well, you
So-
jumped my question, Jeff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You could have.
Stole your
I could
thunder.
have been
I'm
a
sorry.
hero, and because I was going
In
to
that
say,
case,
on
what do you think
behalf
about the
of
NTMP process?
on behalf of the neighborhood, we would like Sandstone to fund an NTMP, and
Yeah.
damn it, do it or else.
Well, that's
Yeah.
good. Look, I think one of the nice things about Sandstone is that they really believe in developing good relationships with the adjacent neighbors of all their projects. And I think they would be very supportive of doing whatever it is that the community wanted to do. When we came into this process, there was nothing outlined. There was no plan. There hadn't been any analysis. And so I think it really does make sense to do an NTMP and engage the community and engage the city's traffic engineering folks and try to figure out what it is that would work best. And so if Sandstone foots the bill for that, then the next project down the line will have more guidance and more understanding of what works and what the city would like to see, what the neighbors would like to see.
Well, we very much would like you guys to do that, so I'm glad to hear that. I now understand why your background looks like thunder, because you were planning on stealing mine. I was going to ask that. I feel blindsided. Okay, back to the questions.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's okay. I was going to look really smart to the neighborhood, and now I just don't anymore. Okay, so back to the questions. Signage, advertising. Will there be any bright lights or advertising signs that would blare into our neighborhood?
No, not at all. In fact, it's funny because particularly when we met with the immediate adjacent neighbors, they said, well, don't do what Osh did. When Osh was up and operating, they had huge floodlights right on the alley where they did their pickups and drop-offs for their large semi trucks. And so we agreed right at the beginning that we weren't going to do those big floodlights. We'll still have lighting out there that will be pedestrian level lighting for security purposes and things like that. It'll be well lit in that sense. Then you're also talking about the face of the wall itself that would face the neighborhood. There won't be big neon signs there. In fact, we are proposing a green wall for that. So when you look up, you'll see the greenery on each balcony, but you'll also have a green wall on the flatter surface that's I guess the far end of the project closest to Slauson. And I don't know if we've got a rendering on that to make it clearer. Thomas, if you got a Rodrigo. just to show what that wall looks like. There you go. So there's no signage on that wall facing the neighborhood.
And this wall that's Segrel. That's the Angelis's house on the corner of Segrel. And what we would see from there is this green wall.
Correct.
You see green wall there, okay, and then all the terraces that we were talking about with the sightlines, that's actually the screen, the planters at each of the terraces that provide that visual cutoff to the neighborhood.
For the sake of at least one person who said this to me recently, they don't want a big green wall. So a green wall is not just a wall painted green, right? It's biological. It's a living organism. What is it?
No, it really is a vertical planted wall. Yes, it does need to be maintained. It needs to be irrigated. And you can see examples of this. If you go to the Westfield Century City shopping mall, there's a example of that. There's also one, I think, on Melrose in West Hollywood, just west of La Cienega. So it's, there are examples of this throughout the city.
Okay, if I'm not mistaken, I think currently from my driveway on Berryman, my view of whatever hotel that is there is like a multi-story hotel would be obstructed by this green wall. And I'd rather look at a green wall than look at that hotel. Next question, how are you guys, okay, I've not read this question before. How are you contributing to the fund to widen the sidewalk and provide for the same look and feel as the 11111 Jefferson development, either by adding trees, lanterns, flowers, because this should be coordinated now. There's been a lot of work on that Jefferson project. They've come to the neighborhood and they've taken our feedback and they've put a lot of they have artwork they are planning. They have flowers, et cetera, that they're planning. What kind of thoughts are you guys giving to that?
Right. So the two projects are actually quite different. Their project is a much larger site. It kind of crosses over Machado Road there, and they've got sort of their own campus. They have a lot more ability to deal with all four sides of their project. We are on the corner, so there's two edges of our project that we don't control at all, right? The property line and then the alley edge. That said, ESA and Alan's team, they're preparing the environmental documents for that project. And so perhaps he can talk a little bit about the street trees and what they're doing over there, as well as what we're doing on our site and how they interact.
Sure. So I'll just first start off by saying that, the 1111 Jefferson project is still in the kind of the early planning stages. There's an EIR being prepared for that. It has not gone public yet. It's still in development. Plans are subject to change. But what I do know is that project, has these sort of corner parks that they're proposing. I think two of them, one on the Machado end, and then one where Jefferson and Sepulveda are, kind of two mini parks. But they have the space for that sort of thing. There's also going to be trees along the sidewalks and that sort of thing. But because they control that sort of block, they're able to plant around the whole sort of perimeter. As far as the sidewalks are concerned, I believe they're at least proposing at least 8-foot wide sidewalks, which I think is relatively consistent with the sidewalks around this project site, if I'm not mistaken. And then, maybe, I don't know if Thomas has any renderings of what the edges of this project site is going to look like in terms of the vegetation. That might be helpful. Thomas, is that something you have, or?
think Thomas is pulling up a plan or rendering of that. Yeah, there you go.
So it's a rendering, an aerial rendering of the corner of Jefferson and Slauson. The landscaping is still under design with the landscape architect, but there is a city mandated urban forestry plan. So it kind of dictates species that are allowed on each specific street face. So there's some consistency built into the city's plan there in itself.
Thanks.
And in terms of sidewalk widths, I think it's basically an 18-foot sidewalk with the planters along Slauson, and then it tapers back to 8 feet as you get toward Jefferson to be consistent with what's happening adjacent to the site.
Thank you. Oh, as a follow-up to the question on the traffic, this because I didn't get to ask it. The now double left-hand turn lane, that's going to become permanent.
Yes, that'll be permanent.
Okay, excellent. Okay, those are the questions that I had submitted prior. So we're going to go to questions that have come in during this meeting, and I'm going to just go down the list. Has Sandstone purchased any nearby properties or have any interest in purchasing nearby properties? And if so, what are their plans and concepts for those properties?
So Sandstone is currently developing a apartment complex that is south of Jefferson on Sepulveda in Westchester. And David, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your interest in other sites in Culver City. My understanding is they don't own anything adjacent. If that's the question, there's nothing, we don't own the Osh site or anything like that. But David, I don't know what you want to say about perhaps other sites in Culver City.
No, I think the question alludes to the Arch side, I believe, or even across the street. And no, we don't have any interest in any properties directly adjacent to this site.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. A question came in. Did any of the concerns, and I'm assuming they mean the people on Sagrel. Yeah. Did any of the concerns have to do with future property values along Sagrel or any other areas in the neighborhood? And then someone texted me a follow-up that was similar, which is, what do you, any historical expectation for property values during construction and post-construction?
Well, I think you'd have to be, I don't know if you all remember the amazing Kreskin. I think you'd have to be Kreskin to really know the exact impact of property values going forward. But I will tell you that when investment is made in a neighborhood, the property values in that neighborhood go up. And I can point out on Sagrel, one of those 5 homes immediately adjacent to the property site sold for $975. The buyer invested, probably 150, he said, $1,000 into it, and is in the process of flipping it. It's on the market for like 1.3 right now. So I think the concerns about property values sometimes are overblown. Typically, when there's investment that happens in a neighborhood, those property values go up.
There's always been concern. I think at one meeting, one of the neighbors who has since sold his house exclaimed that his property values have gone down just with the announcement of the project, that he was afraid. And people do fear, change, especially like that. My experience has been different than that, but everybody's experience is going to be different. And I can understand why people might fear that. We have a question about the imagery of what you just showed a rendering of the hotel sort of from above in the front. Could you just put that back up again to make sure that person's question was answered?
And actually the better one, Thomas, is the rendering, the ground level rendering where you can kind of see the reflectivity of the glass. There you go. That's probably the better one.
Well, that's a night view.
It's a night view.
And do you have a day view of that?
Let me pull up a different file that has that one. That one didn't make it into the final document.
While we're waiting for that to be pulled up, I notice in many conversations we've talked, there has been talk about what would go into the bottom space, a restaurant of some kind. Do you the operators? Do you have somebody in mind to operate the restaurant? What kind of a restaurant would that be? And then adjacent to that question, I'm assuming it's a hotel. There'll be meeting spaces. And we are a neighborhood association that would love to be able to, once in a while, occupy your meeting space free of charge and possibly go down to your restaurant and enjoy and partake after a meeting. Can you help us out with something like that?
Absolutely. We want to be friendly neighbors, and we would love to have you partake in our meeting rooms and then partake in our restaurant. So
I look forward to it.
yeah.
I'm always looking for a place.
As far as the restaurant is concerned, I want to say it's going to be casual dining. Our theory is that we want to be able to invite our neighbors in. We don't want to make it the pricing prohibitive. I think we talked previously that we are going to offer discounts to your neighborhood in hopes that you will all partake in the facility.
Will there be a bar?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. That wasn't a text. That was really just something I wanted to know. Okay. Moving on. We're still waiting for the image of the front facade. If we could see that. There was somebody had that question. Bonnie had that question. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to move to Ryan's question, which is, what about, for Ryan, this is from Doug. What about cars taking a right from Slauson onto Jefferson and attempting to get on the 405 going south? This is an issue now. Would you expect that that would get worse with more traffic volume?
Yeah, we would expect based on, the net project traffic volumes for this project, if you take a look at the hotel minus what's the existing uses, yeah, they go up during the weekday AM peak hour. The net project traffic volumes are 72 trips, and during the PM peak hour, it's 67. So let me just pull up real quick the table. So during the PM peak hour, when things are really critical, heading down toward the freeway, there would be 31 additional trips heading outbound. Not all of them in that direction, but some of them. So yeah, there would be a slight increase in right turning traffic from Slauson eastbound to Jefferson southwestbound. Yeah.
Is that a 50% increase?
No. It'd be a pretty small percentage increase. Let me pull up those volumes real quick. So it looks like it goes from 230 to 254 right turns in the PM peak hour. So up 24. Okay. So it's about a 10% increase.
Right.
Something like that. Yeah. Not enough to trip a significant impact at the intersection, but it would go up. Yeah.
So it would go up about 10%. That's very helpful. Thank you. I'm looking at any other questions. Can we get the rendering during the daytime, what the image might look like in the daytime? There's concern that it will people are of mixed emotions about the big black building, the big black glass building in downtown Culver City in front of the Amazon studios, that it looks like a monolith. Some people like it. Some people find it aesthetically not only displeasing, but impenetrable. And there's concern that this would look like that. Can you address that?
Still trying to find that image.
Yeah, I'm still trying to pull that up. Just a few more moments. I think I just have the file.
And I'll just, while he's pulling that up, I'll tell everybody in the meeting, this is the last question that we have. I have a follow-up, and Seth just threw me a follow-up on traffic, but anybody else has any questions that they would like answered in this setting, this would be a good time to send it into the chat. Otherwise, you'd have to reach out to Jeff and the Sandstone people on your own.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and put my cell number and my email address in the chat box for anybody who, if we close down this meeting and you think of something that you want to ask later, feel free to reach out to me anytime.
That'd be great. While we're waiting for, okay, so while I'm waiting for Thomas to, oh wait, he found it. So this is during the day.
That's correct. I mean, it's a glass.
I'm sorry, Steve, you muted yourself.
It's a glass-clad building, and you can tell from the nighttime view, it takes on the character of its surroundings. Okay, and so by day it's very luminous. It essentially pixelizes its surroundings, and by night it becomes more of a what we like to call a vitrine, what actually shows the illumination of spaces within the building. So it does change by night and day.
And this is the view coming out of Del Taco, right? This is, as
I'm trying not to use that reference.
Yeah.
I'm using the
Roughly.
reference to keep myself amused. If I'm buying a rug, kitchen fixtures, or getting a taco at Del Taco, this is what I see.
Yeah, you're going to say, darn it, I should have gone to the Sandstone OLS's hotel for a meal.
And then for everybody else, just to make sure that I'm clear, so there's this opening, which is the entrance to the hotel. Up above this glass facade is actually where the convening pool area is, which is also buffered by this glass wall, in addition to being a glass wall all the way, or protective buffering all the way around. This is something that would protect from sound up there as well.
Thomas, since you have the cursor, why don't you go from top to bottom and just identify the different layers that Alan just went through?
Sure. So up at the 5th floor level, that's the pool deck. And directly below there is a level of guest rooms. Beneath there is a bridge connecting both wings of the hotel. And at that level, there are also guest rooms, followed by an area of meeting spaces and the restaurant in the corner.
So that courtyard is actually this, it's actually a portal that actually is a entrance to the hotel. It also serves as a, an outdoor courtyard. So it's a very public and inviting facade. And so the portal actually has another green wall on the inside, as well as terraces to the elevated courtyard beyond.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Couple last questions regarding the website. We're showing that the last update on the website is May 29th, and it doesn't show an operator chosen. Can that be updated?
Yeah, absolutely. We must have just missed that as we were doing this. Certainly, we want to pound our chest about OLS. They're a great operator. They do great things. We'll update that for sure.
Thanks. And then this, couple questions on the scope of the NTMP. Is it just going to be impacting Segrel, Culver Park, or
So
what will it encompass?
yeah, so that's something that I guess gets determined with the city, and Sandstone will pay for the study, and then down the road, as the various elements that need to be implemented need to come online, you know, sort of the next developer in line will have a menu of things that can be done to improve traffic in the neighborhood. My guess is that it would encompass the entire Sunkist Park area, because you have to look at the cut through traffic. So you wouldn't be dealing with just Segrel, you'd be dealing with all those streets. Ryan, I don't know if you have more to add to that.
Yeah, basically, I mean, it's up to the community. It's what the community thinks the problems are. So, I mean, if it's just limited to Segrel and Culver Park Drive, that's one thing. But if there are other issues that need to be addressed, and there are enough people in that area that think it's a problem, then yeah, it can all be looked at.
Well,
And
you go ahead, Jeff.
well, I was just saying, and typically what happens is you'll have, let's say the residents on Segrel will say, hey, we want a cul-de-sac. I'm not saying they do, but just hypothetically, they said, we want a cul-de-sac. Well, that is going to force traffic to spill over to the next street. So then folks on Culver Park. So I think you have to really look at it holistically from an entire neighborhood perspective. And I would think that Gabe Garcia and the folks at City Hall would feel the same way. I think doing it focused just on a single street wouldn't really solve your problem.
No, and I appreciate you saying that because I live on Berryman and Patham, and I already see cut through traffic coming down Berryman. I can only imagine what would happen on Ryandale and on Hayter. It's going to affect everybody. So regarding the NTMP, when would that process begin, and how would we get involved in it?
Well, again, that's really something that happens at the city level. They will go out and conduct surveys sort of door to door to make sure that there's enough people that are interested in this. You're going to need 50% plus one, Ryan, is that the right number, to move forward on that process, and then the city sort of governs it from there. There's a number of hearings and studies and analysis that get done through that process.
But what I'm asking.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say it's not something that happens overnight, and it's something that really does require cooperation between the city and the neighbors to try to get to that place that everybody wants to be.
Sure. I'm new to all this. So do you guys notify the city that Sandstone is funding an NTMP and the neighborhood wants to start this conversation? How does the process work?
So as it's set up, it will be something that we agree to as part of the entitlement. So when the city approves it, this will be one of the things that then becomes a condition for us to fund that process. Now, when that happens, what the timing is, whether the city has the personnel available to do that at a certain time, is really up to the city. But all of you know that it's out there now, right? And this is an option. And so, push the city on your timeline and hope that the city, jumps on it quickly. I think in talking to both council members that were at that meeting early on, their only holdup was funding. They felt like the reason that an NTMP had not been done in Sunkist Park was because the city didn't have the money to fund it. Well, now you have a developer who is willing to pay for the process. Perhaps they'll move quicker.
Well, that's great. I will reach out to the council members once the new council's been seated, and start the conversation from there. I don't see any other questions. I do see people saying, I love the green wall and the design elements from the alleyway look toward the residents looks great. the art. Thanks for the great architecture team. I like the front too. Grateful to the team for taking into consideration for our neighborhood's concerns and making changes. I look forward to the Jeff Hotel. That's what I'm seeing from people. I don't see any other questions. I want to thank everybody on this call, from the neighbors to the operator to the developers to the architects, everybody, including Jeff, for making this happen and facilitating this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
No, really, yes. Thank you so much for doing it. We're going to upload this this Zoom meeting to YouTube so that anybody in Sunkist Park or the surrounding area that wants to know what's happening with the Jeff Hotel can go ahead and watch it. If you guys feel the need to link it on the Jeff Hotel's website that this meeting took place, feel free. I have nothing else. I'm looking at board members to see if anybody else has anything else. Other than that, I'll let you have the last word if you want, Jeff.
Great. I just want to thank you for the opportunity and keep the door open. We're happy to talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere. So if there's a question that comes up, or if there was a neighbor who couldn't make this meeting and has a question, feel free to have them reach out to us. And we look forward to being part of the fabric of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.